This is a GRDC podcast.
We're standing here in a paddock of mungbeans. Thank you for joining me. So I'm here today with Dr. Merrill Ryan from Queensland DPI, Principal Plant Breeder, and Tim Thorne, an Allora grower. Yep. Excellent. All right. So Merrill, let's not bury the lead. Why we're here today is to talk about these new game-changing mungbean varieties. So tell me all about it.
Yes, it's a very exciting time. We don't get to release new varieties every day of the week. It only happens every couple of years. These varieties have been 6 years in the making. So it's a proof of a lot of hard work. 2 lines out of 23,000 trial plots a year that we do. 2 lines out of 10,000 pot and plot disease nurseries that we do. So it's a lot of hard work. I have a very hard-working team behind me, a multidisciplinary team of expert statisticians, biometricians, grain quality chemists. You name it, we're all in the game, pathologists as well, because disease and yield are our principal breeding objectives. And so we're really excited to be sharing these with growers like Tim, sharing the credentials and the merits of them in the hope that these guys will consider changing varieties, which is not as always an easy thing to do when you're sort of stuck with the mainstay variety Jade's been in the market for 10 years now. So we don't take it lightly to convince growers of making a change, but I think their money and their levies go into this program, and the double-digit yield gains on these varieties shouldn't be ignored, along with their disease resistance profiles and their grain quality. So I guess we just start at the top. Why we've named them Brolga and Kookaburra is very exciting, because we used to use precious gemstones, so crystal, jade, opal. Yep. But we wanted to really give it an Australian flavour, because 99% of them are exported, and we thought, we want to fly the Australian brand, so why not fly it with Australian native birds? And so I think that'll really brand it globally around the place. So this is the start, a new fresh beginning. This legume's been around like 4,400 years, and we see this as a fresh and exciting beginning for them. And we've got our mates here in the paddock.
That's why we're standing here with a Brolga and a Kookaburra, I guess.
That's right.
So tell us about these two varieties.
Okay, so, and I think it's important to really get the message out there that they're two. But when we release 2 together, it can be sometimes quite confusing for growers to know, which one of those 2 am I going with? So we have a variety management package brochure that will distill that for growers. But I think the take-home message is that we call Brolga for 2 reasons. One, because it's broadly adapted. So I think B for Brolga, B for broad, and I think that will be a really good thing to keep in the memory bank, because it works from the Burdekin all the way down to Gunnedah, which is where we've got 6 breeding trials in each of those 3 growing regions, Central Queensland, Southern Queensland and New South Wales. So it works in all of those. So B for Brolga. It's also tall. It's a very tall, like the bird itself. So we went, okay, we'll make Brolga the tall one. And then we chose Kookaburra because it's a little bit shorter, and that variety is a little bit shorter. But the thing going for that variety is that it's regionally specific. And for you guys, that's critical, because the program in its 20 years and releasing 8 varieties now has never actually released a regionally specific variety. Okay. But we actually think that's the way of the future, right? If we're just trying to get something that works everywhere, we're compromising where we've got sites, say in Central Queensland, where lines are really performing well, but then we come down here and they don't do so well. So we think that to get the yield gains that each region deserves, and we have the potential in the germplasm for, which we're excited about, and there's still plenty to do. This crop's only been bred for 20 or 30 years, not like some of the others for hundreds of years. So we've got plenty of genetic diversity and germplasm and yield potential to still come. And so this regional adaptation is important, and I say that because Kookaburra will not work in Central Queensland. And that will be a really important message to get out there. It works in Southern Queensland and really does well in New South Wales as well. So that's the principal 2 differences. The take-home message, one's broadly adapted, B, Brolga broad, and Kookaburra is for the Southern Queensland and New South Wales. So
Great. All right. Well, I want to throw to Tim for just a minute here. So, Tim, where do mungbeans fit into your cropping rotation?
We're not a big mungbean grower. mainly soil type, but we are getting some lighter soil that we definitely look at them in a rotation. If there's moisture there, we try to use it, so it gives us another planting opportunity. Different risk mitigations over other crops sometimes, yeah, so, and they're fairly quick, and you can get back into the ground pretty quick too, yeah, straight back into a winter crop if it rains, easy to get back into. So yeah, and it's great that they're going to be regional, because normally our little growing area gets forgotten about really, so we just got to take the mainstream variety, so it's great someone's looking after us.
So, and just you've had a bit of a walk around with Merrill this morning and a good look-see. So what do you like about what you're seeing and hearing about these new varieties?
Oh, definitely disease resistance and yield gain, because that's the only way we can make money is yield, and maybe pick up a grade too, like better in that side of it as well. So yeah, yield and a grade may be a better grade, so that's all money to us really. Yeah, so for the same amount of effort. Yeah, so yep, that's what we're looking at.
Nice. So Merrill, tell us, how long have these varieties been in development? Tell us about the mungbean development program.
Okay, so it's a program that, like I said, spans from Burdekin down to Gunnedah. We have 6 yield trials a year. We have about 800 fixed lines that we work with. We make about 70 crosses a year, and we're using some new advanced genetic technologies to expedite the process to the point where growers used to be 10 years to release a variety. These have taken 6 years, so they were crossed in 2016, and the decision to release was made in 2022, 6 years later. They're not related in any way, so they don't have, there's one that has a grandparent, Kookaburra has a grandparent in common with Opal, a previous variety, but in terms of them being uniquely different from one another, they don't share any common germplasm. So that goes well for stability too, because if there was some random constraint that was to hit the industry, it won't necessarily take out, all the varieties if they're all brothers and sisters and similarly related. But I think the exciting thing is the yield. We're really confident about that yield potential because they're 5 years of data that we have. So they've been trialled from 2020 to 2024 in 31 different trials. So that's sort of the yield data and the robustness at which you have to look at. In central Queensland, over those 5 years, we had 13 trials of data. For southern Queensland, we had 11 trials of data across the 5 years. And in New South Wales, we had 7 trials that spanned a 3-year time. And that was a COVID thing when people couldn't get across the border to actually put trials in. So we're confident that, in this neck of the woods, we're looking at a 7 to 12% yield advantage between the two varieties. And in New South Wales, that's between 7 and 19%. And because of their disease resistance that Tim was talking to, we happen to have had some serendipitous infections of halo blight, which is a bacterial disease, usually in moist conditions. So our yield trials, we try to not get disease in them. We have special disease nurseries where we artificially inoculate and infect. But whenever we get a yield trial that gets infected, it's a really good yield loss trial data set. And you'll see in the variety management package, it's available to growers. A couple of the trials listed there were infected with halo blight. And then these lines, we're talking 20, 30, 40% higher yielding. And I'll give an example in Liverpool Plains, which is a bit of a way from here. In 2021, there was an infection go through and jade yielded 0.8 tonne per hectare. And Opal, which has some halo blight resistance, and Brolga, they did 1 tonne per hectare. And Kookaburra did 1.5 tonnes per hectare. So you're nearly doubling your yield. The real world, that's how it rolls. And the other good thing about our yield data, I think, being relevant, is that often people talk about the yield gap in mungbeans, and there's lots of GRDC investments looking at that. And there's a great podcast on how to grow successful mungbeans, on YouTube that you can Google, about the 6 or 7 key things you've got to get right agronomically. But our yield trials, 25% of those 31 were less than a tonne per hectare. So that's pretty real world, right? So 25% of those 31. And then we had 60% of them were in that 1 to 1.5 tonne per hectare. So that's pretty standard. And then we had 15% of those 31 trials sat in that greater than 1.5 tonne. And so I think we've had I think our average site yields for those have been from 0.9 tonne per hectare to 2. So I feel like, and we've had a range of sowing window opportunities. We sow from early January through to late February and even beyond that. That's the great thing about mung beans. Highest value broadacre crop you can get. It's great for weed control, right? So you can take out different types of weeds that you can't take out in winter cereal crops. So for weed and disease management and control, fast crop, fast use of moisture, late rain if your sorghum doesn't go in. So all those reasons why growers grow them. I just think it's great that our data set is pretty reflective of real world when you get 0.9 and we get 2 and everything in between, just like growers do.
It's a good news story, that's for sure. And just tell me, these varieties came out of a co-investment?
Yeah, sure. So it's a co-investment with GRDC and Queensland DPI. And look, it's gone back, it's now over 20 years of investment. I think we're onto our 5th cycle of 4 or 5 year projects, and obviously in breeding it's a long-term gain. We also have international mungbean improvement network projects, so we gain and access and share germplasm across the globe for new and emerging traits. So some of the biggest diseases globally are not diseases we have here presently. Things like yellow mungbean mosaic virus that's in Indonesia. We've got genetics in and ready, and incorporated for when potential, it's called preemptive breeding. And also the industry is facing in some pockets of areas, particularly here in southern Queensland, issues with fusarium wilt, which is a soil-borne disease. And we're very excited about having some genetic resistance that we've identified. Not contracted in this current co-investment, but we're hoping into the future projects we'll be able to nail genetic resistance for fusarium, because now we've reached the holy grail. We have been trying for 20 years to get a large green seeded mungbean with halo blight resistance, because all of our resistance germplasm was a small seeded type. And it's taken us, that's why we're so excited, like finally we have made it, a large green shiny. And the good thing is with our bacterial resistances have proven to be very robust. So I don't know if you've had much experience with chickpeas or any fungal diseases. The pathogen, a variety might last 18 months if you're lucky before the pathogen catches up and overrides that resistance. And seemingly we've got researchers at UniSQ looking into that, but the robustness of the bacterial resistance and the mechanism and pathway genetically that's conferring that is greatly giving us a reliability and a sustainability of that resistance. It's not breaking down very easily. So I can confidently say to Tim, they've got halo blight, they've got tan spot, and I don't think that's going to, we'll be here in 2 years' time and that'll have broken down. Don't think that's going to happen.
Fantastic. So what is it that you want growers to do for this upcoming season?
Have a go, have a crack, put a little bit of it in, see what you can do with it. I do know, I've heard there's a lot more Brolga, because it's the broadly adapted one. A lot more seed available for growers for the Brolga, less available for the Kookaburra this coming season. So I just implore them, if they're planning for mungbeans, to get in and talk to their seed producers or the people from which they buy their grain, and maybe put in a bit of an early order, because my experience with some of the other legumes I've bred, growers ring me up and go, I can't get any of the seed. And I say, well, and it won't be at its peak seed availability this coming season. But, we're not big fans of spring mungbeans, but in readiness for the summer, hopefully Tim can be on the front foot and make a phone call and get a bag or two.
So you are potentially one of those growers, Tim. So what are your thoughts? What are you thinking for the upcoming season?
Like I said, we farm moisture, so I can't make a decision today. It's what's going to happen at planting time or before planting time, and moisture probe in the ground. But definitely. I like the look of these. So definitely. So
I think there's two types of growers really. There's the growers that set up for the crop, that in the terms of their rotation, and they could tell you now, 2 years out, I'm going to grow mungbeans then. And we have plenty of growers like that. They set it up and they get the high value, they get the 2 tonne. I think one of the myths with mungbeans is that they actually need more water than people give them credit. They're a subtropical legume species, and I think the research that DPI has done in recent years is that if you want to get 1.25 tonne per hectare or greater, you need 200 mils of plant available water for that crop.
Yeah.
And really you need somewhere between 110 and 125 mils of plant available water up front. And so that's what Tim's saying, you know, if he gets late rain, you know, and he knows it's short, he can get it in and get a cash crop. You know, if he manages it well, if he's done a best management practice course or he's got a accredited agronomist, because they don't come without, it's a tricky crop to grow, but you get well rewarded if you can manage that. And so, you know, there's critical things. You don't grow them where you've got nematodes. You don't grow them if you've got sodic soils. You know, you don't put pulses on pulses. There's some critical nutrition's really important. Phosphorus and potassium are really vital. You put down fertiliser, you put down inoculum, you insect manage well, you desiccate and you understand how to desiccate properly. All those agronomic. I can give you 10% genetic yield gain, but Tim's not going to see it
do it right in the field,
if he can't agronomically manage it. And that's why GRDC's co-investments over the time have not just been for breeding and genetics, but coupling with agronomy. Because, and I've even talked to them about the Kookaburra and how it's such a different plant type that it may need to be looked at around row spacing and plant density. And if it works under irrigation, which it might well do because it's stand up, we've had some trials where late rains have annihilated, everything's lodged, and Kookaburra has been able with its multi-branching plant type to stand up. So there might be some opportunity in irrigation situations for Kookaburra. And but yeah, agronomics is very, very important, as well as the genetics that drives it. But then you've got growers that, maybe more like Tim, who make the decision, they're farming moisture. If the rainfall comes, then they'll have a crack. And they know what they're doing because I imagine you've got an accredited agronomist. Those courses are available on an annual basis, so I implore growers or their paid agronomists to get that course under their belt, and then they'll know when to desiccate. It's not a tricky exercise. These are an indeterminate crop, so they tend to keep podding and flowering unless you shut them down. We've bred for determinacy, but still you get rain around maturity. They just want to keep going, and growers have this terribly tricky decision to make as to whether they're going to wait and spray out a second flush of pods or not. These courses that the Australian Mungbean Association run are really good because you don't wait to 90% black pod anymore, which is the label, says the label on the label. You actually look for physiological maturity in the pod with the seeds, you tip up the pod, and then if they fall out, you're ready to... So it's all those little tricks of the trade that, you know, you've got to... Whether you plan to grow the crop or you more farm on moisture, you still need to know those basic knowledge fundamentals to make it work.
You absolutely do. And you've mentioned so many resources in this podcast, and so we want people to know that they will all be in the show notes that are linked to this podcast. And of course, people can head to the GRDC website, grdc.com.au. But Merrill Ryan and Tim Thorne, I want to thank you guys for joining me today out here in the paddock in glorious Warwick, and good luck with both your endeavours.
Thanks very much, Sally.
Thank you.